Hi, everyone. People sing many songs at a Jewish wedding. Some are brand new. They bring new energy, new dances, flash mobs, sometimes choreography that takes weeks of preparation. But some of the golden oldies are simply part of the mandatory soundtrack of a Jewish wedding. Mehira, Yassis Alayich, Keitzad Meraktim. If these songs were never to be played or sung, you might begin to wonder whether the celebration was really complete. But then there's one song that Chazal tell us was once a staple at Jewish weddings. In fact, the Gemara tells us that people would literally dance at weddings singing Motzei o Matzah, Matzah o Motzei. And yet, I don't think I've ever heard that song at a wedding. In fact, as far as I know, in all of Jewish music, I don't think anyone has ever composed a tune for it that I'm aware of. Which raises an interesting question. What's up with that? How did a song that Chazal describe as a wedding staple disappear so completely from the Jewish wedding? And while we're at it, what does it say today for you and me? You see, the Gemara in Brachos tells us that at a wedding they would dance and ask, Matzah or Motzei, which song applies to this chassan, to this bridegroom? Matzah Isha Matzah Tov? Does he say he who finds a wife finds good? Or Umotzei Ani Mar Mimaves Es Hoisha, and I find a woman more bitter than death? No, it's not hard to understand why that particular song doesn't actually make the wedding playlist. But perhaps the more important question is not why we stopped singing it. Perhaps the question is why Chazal ever sang it in the first place. Why would Jewish guests at a wedding of a young couple, at one of their happiest moments of their lives, ask a question that sounds almost cruel? Matzo motze? Did he find good? Or did he find marmi maves, better than death? And perhaps the answer is that Chazal weren't really looking up and asking a question about the Kala, about her. They were asking a question about the Chassan, about him. What is he looking for? Because what you look for in another person has a great deal to do with what you'll eventually find. Indeed, Rav Shimshon David Pincus explained that that a person who's constantly re-examining his spouse, did I make the right choice? Did I get the best possible match? Is this really what I thought it would be? Is placing himself on the road to Mar Mimaves, because no human being can survive perpetual inspection. If you're constantly looking for proof that you made the wrong choice, you'll eventually find the evidence. There's no person without shortcomings. There's no spouse without habits that irritate. There's no child who will always behave exactly as we hoped. There's no friend who will always respond exactly as we would have responded. And if our basic approach to another person is, let me determine whether you're good enough, we'll eventually discover that something that isn't good enough. But perhaps there's another way to approach the people in our lives. Instead of being an evaluator, we can also be a discoverer. Instead of asking constantly, did I get the right person? We can ask, what can I still discover about this person? And that's a very different way of living. Think about the difference between evaluating someone and getting to know someone. When we evaluate, we look for evidence. Does he or she have the right qualities that I wanted? Does she respond the way I expect? Is this person thoughtful and more thoughtful enough? Is the person responsible enough, successful enough, religious enough, sensitive enough? And then we create a list. And then consciously or subconsciously, we keep checking the person against the list. But when we're truly interested in someone, we do something very different. We become curious. We want to understand. We ask questions. We listen. We discover things that we didn't know. And perhaps that's one of the great secrets of successful relationships. The healthiest relationships are not built by people who constantly evaluate one another. They're built by people who remain open to being influenced by one another. In fact, Dr. John Gottman, perhaps the biggest expert on successful marriage and relationship research, has emphasized that the most critical element of a successful marriage is whether spouses are willing to accept influence from one another. The point is not that a healthy spouse agrees with everything the other person says. It's something much more attainable. It's when a spouse demonstrates that, quote, I'm willing to consider that you might see something that I don't. I'm willing to hear you. I'm willing to learn from you. I'm willing to let knowing you change me. And that's not weakness. It's one of the deepest forms of strength because there's something very difficult about saying you may be right, especially to someone we love, especially to someone with whom we disagree at the same time, especially when we are convinced that we are right. But imagine a relationship in which both people are capable of saying, I hadn't thought of it that way. Tell me more. Maybe I misunderstood. You may be right. Those aren't signs of weakness. Those are signs that the relationship is alive. And perhaps that gives us a new way to understand another mitzvah in this week's parsha. We're told, Lo sacharosh b'shor uvachamor yachdav, don't plow with an ox and a donkey together. Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky noted that an ox and a donkey don't pull in exactly the same way. They have different strengths, different rhythms, different capacities. Put them under the same yoke, and each frustrates the other. Rabbi Twersky applied this idea to relationships. People are different. They think differently. They process differently. They communicate differently. They respond differently. And if two people are going to build something together, they have to recognize that difference. But perhaps there's another important distinction. The Torah doesn't tell us that differences are bad. It tells us not to force two fundamentally different animals to pull in exactly the same way. The problem is not that they're different. The problem is trying to pretend that they aren't. And maybe that's one of the most important lessons that we can learn about the people in our lives. Different doesn't equal defective. And perhaps that's precisely where openness begins. I can't be influenced by someone until I stop assuming that different means wrong. As long as my instinct is, if you don't see it my way, then you must not see it correctly. I may hear your words, but I will never really listen. But when I can say, you see something differently because you're different from me, and perhaps that's exactly why you can show me something I can't see, then difference stops being a threat. Instead, it becomes opportunity. Your spouse may see differently. Your child may have a different personality. Your friend may process life differently. Even someone sitting beside you in shul may see Torah and life through a lens very different from your own. The question isn't, why aren't you more like me? The question is, what can I learn from the fact that you aren't like me? Maybe Hashem didn't put that person in our lives so that we can make them more like ourselves. Maybe he put them there because we need what only that person can teach us. There's another section of the parsha that might help us understand what happens when we lose that perspective. The Torah describes a husband who marries his wife, usneya, and he comes to hate her. And what happens next? He begins making accusations against her. Rashi explains this as an example of Aveira Goreres Aveira, of one transgression leading to another. But Rav Yitzchak Koppelman, the Rosh Hashiva of Lucerne Zatzal, pointed out in a profound insight. The Motzi Shema, the giving of the bad name, is not really the beginning of the problem. It's the symptom. The problem began much earlier, usneya. So something had already gone wrong in the relationship. And once a resentment enters a relationship, something else often happens. We stop being curious. We stop trying to understand. We start assuming. We think we already know what the other person meant. We know why they did it. We know what they're going to say. We know what kind of person they indeed are. And when we think we already know someone, we no longer really listen to them. Every new incident becomes another piece of evidence confirming what we already believe. But perhaps we can interrupt that process with one simple question. Help me understand. Instead of, why would you do something like that? Try, help me understand what happened. Instead of, I know what you meant, try, tell me what you meant. Instead of immediately deciding that someone has disappointed us, perhaps we can leave open the possibility that there's something that we haven't yet understood. That's not lowering our standards. It's raising the quality of our relationships. And perhaps this is why one of the most beautiful relationship instructions in the entire parsha comes later. Naki elabeso shana achas v'simachas ishto asher lakach. The husband should be free for his home for one full year, and he should make his wife happy. Rashi cites Onkelos, who emphasizes that the responsibility is not to be happy with his wife, it's v'simach es ishto, to make his wife happy. Rabbi Avram Pamzatzal drew a beautiful lesson from this. A young man can begin to wonder whether the great Metzia he found is really as wonderful as he originally imagined. And that question can become destructive. Because the Torah doesn't tell him to spend his first year determining, is she making me happy? It tells him, make her happy. Move away from the focus of what am I getting and move towards what am I actually giving. And by the way, that principle extends beyond marriage. A parent can ask, what does my child need from me? A friend can ask, what does my friend need from me? A child can ask, what would bring my parent a little bit of nachas? A colleague can ask, how can I make this person's job easier? And all of these questions require the same thing. I have to get outside of myself. I have to be interested enough in another person to discover what matters to them. I have to be humble enough to allow what I discover to influence me. Perhaps that's the deeper message of matzah or motzei. Chazal were not asking whether the chassan had found the perfect wife. They were asking what kind of person he would become within the relationship. Would he spend his life evaluating? Or would he spend his life discovering? Would he constantly ask, did I find the right person? Or would he keep asking, what can I learn from this person? And maybe that's why matzah isha, if you found a wife, matzah tov, you found tov, isn't really promising us that marriage will be perfect. It's teaching us something much more attainable. You can find good. You can keep finding good. You can discover qualities that you didn't appreciate at first. You can understand something about another person that you didn't understand 5 years ago. You can watch a child grow into someone you never imagined. You can discover something new about a spouse after 20 years. You can hear a friend say that something that changes the way you think. And perhaps that's what it means to have a matzah tov. Not to have found a perfect person, but to become someone who knows how to find tov in people. So this week, with one person, just one person, try something different. Don't evaluate, discover. Ask a question to which you genuinely don't know the answer, and then do something surprisingly difficult. Listen without preparing your response. Maybe ask what's been on your mind lately, or is there something you wish I understood better, or simply just tell me more. And when they answer, don't immediately explain why they're wrong. Don't fix it. Don't compare it to your own experience. Just listen. And then ask yourself, what did I learn about this person that I didn't know before? And perhaps maybe even take it one step further. Is there anything this person said that I can allow to influence me? Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. But the willingness to ask the question changes the relationship because it says, I don't have you completely figured out. I'm still interested in you. I still want to learn from you. And perhaps that's one of the greatest gifts we can give to another human being. Not agreement, not pretending they're perfect, not even having them completely figured out, but letting them know you're still worth discovering. And perhaps that brings us back to the strange song Chazal once sang at Jewish weddings, Motzei or Matzah. At first it sounds as though they were asking what kind of person did he find? Did he find Tov or did he find Marmi Maves? Did he find good or worse than death? But perhaps they were asking something much deeper. Not what kind of person did you find, but rather what kind of finder are you? Will you spend your life judging the people Hashem placed into your life or discovering them? Will you keep looking for what's missing or keep finding the tov? Because the greatest relationships are not built by finding perfect people. They're built by people who never stop discovering one another. So perhaps matzah or motzei was never asking what kind of person you found. Maybe it was asking what kind of finder you indeed are. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.